So 5 or 6 years ago, I drastically changed the type of hook I was using, and it's 100% it's been for the better, and I've definitely landed more fish as a result. So just want to throw it back a little bit here and show you the hooks I used to use back in the day, which were the good old B911. You know, great hook this. A lot of people have used these hooks over the years. They're all I used to use really. I used to use the lighter turquoise, the standard packet for F1s and smaller carp, and you know the X packet for proper carp. And you know, I got on well with the hooks, but very occasionally I'd lose an odd fish, especially F1 shallow with the eyed version. You know, sometimes you get one of them big F1s on which just doesn't want to come in, and you end up pulling too hard and it pings straight out. And I used to have that a little bit with the 911, but I always kind of put up with it, and I wouldn't change. PTFE hooks came along, and the first hook that I really used that was a PTFE was an F1 pellet. And as soon as I started using these hooks, I just couldn't believe the difference a PTFE coating made to them, which is like a special Teflon coating. And what this does is it kind of dulls down the finish on the hook, so it's not shiny as you know the 911s and those kind of carbon wire finish on the hooks. So it's not shiny, which I think probably makes a bit of a difference in clear water. But the main advantage of the PTFE, I'd say, is that it just makes the hook so much sharper, and so much sharper and stronger as well. It makes them last a bit longer, and the points of PTFE hooks are a lot sharper than your standard more traditional carbon hooks. But it's got to the point now where I won't use a hook unless it's PTFE coated. They're just so good. Now, one thing you should look for when choosing a hook is the actual shape of it. So if you look at this hook here, it's got quite a wide gape and a short shank there relative to the size of the hook. And so that's perfect because it's so rounded. It's perfect for sort of larger rounded baits like your pellets, corn, meat, you know, paste in the bigger sizes. Or if you're putting multiple baits on a hook, like triple maggot, something like that, then you want that wider gape to accommodate them, because the last thing you want is for, you know, the bait to mask the hook, or, you know, you sometimes hear of anglers having the maggot go over the point of the hook, or a worm folding over the hook, and when that happens you tend to bump the fish off, which obviously we don't want at all. So yeah, that's why with pellets and bigger baits, then you're looking for that kind of hook shape. Whereas when we're going for maggots and pinkies and smaller single baits, that's when you're looking for this kind of narrower gape. And as you notice as well, these tend to have a longer shank as well, because they're used more for smaller fish and lots of fish, and a longer shank is much easier to unhook. So you're not looking around for the hook all the time. It's easier to get out of the fish when you're looking for larger numbers of fish. So yeah, always match your hook shape to the bait and species you intend to use. So we're talking carp. Decent sized carp, common and mirror carp, on the pole, on the bottom, or on the rod, straight hooking baits. This is the choice. So this is the MXC2, part of the Matrix range for the PTFE range, which was launched about a year ago. And yeah, this is quite a heavy gauge hook. You know, there's no point messing around with lighter or even sometimes medium gauges for carp. You know, carp aren't that fussy. The bait's there, they tend to eat it, so you know there's no point, you know, compromising losing fish by using too light a hook. So make sure when you hook something you get it out. So this time of year and sort of summertime, I like a 16 for sort of pellets, you know, 6mm pellets, hard pellets. scale that down to an 18 once we get probably to November time and the temperature really starts to plummet, get frost and things, and the fish slow down. You just want a smaller hook really that's easier for fish to suck in. Likewise, what you can do as well, in the warmer months when you're fishing down the edges, sort of bunches of maggots, bunches of worm, something I've been guilty of in the past is probably not stepping up my hook size quickly enough. You know, sometimes using a 14 down the edge when actually you can get away with those bad boys, a 12. So yeah, you know, a bunch of dead maggots, worms, something like that, a couple of pieces of corn. Carp, when they come into the edge, are like hoovers, aren't they? And they've got great big gobs, so you know you can get away with a big hook, and obviously the bigger hook you're going to have, the less likely you are to lose fish and pull out a fish with sort of heavier edge elastics. So you know that's a good choice. Is that it's a thick gauge for tying spades onto hook lengths. Right, so let's say we're going to hair rig sort of bait, sort of like pellets or corn for carp. This is the choice. This is similar to the MXC 2. It's just sort of an eyed version. So obviously with an eyed hook, you're going to hair rig. You can tie a hair on the end with a band or a quick stop or something like that. And yeah, again, you want a thick gauge again when you're sort of hair rigging on the bomb and the feeder, method feeder, pellet feeder, those kind of things, because the fish are big. There's a lot of pressure as well when you're using sort of weight near the hook. So especially when you've got a 30-gram feeder near the hook, you know, you don't want too light a gauge of hook. So it's going to be sitting on the bottom as well, so you know it's not as important when you're fishing sort of dead depth on the pole. So yeah, definitely a heavy hook like that, 16. Again, I'd say in the past I use 16s and 14s typically for baits like 8mm pellet, which is a great bait on the bomb. You know, sometimes I could have probably got away with a 12 in the past with sort of 11mm pellets. But then again, sometimes as well, I think on heavily pressurised waters, especially when maybe fish have had a lot of angling pressure and the mouths aren't in great condition, you're actually better off fishing with a smaller hook. So sometimes, you know, even in summer, a size 18 hook, maybe 18-eyed hook, as long as it's a thick gauge, can be good with sort of, you know, hair rig maggot and things like that. Just small baits when the fish's mouths have maybe had a bit of hammer, unfortunately. Yeah, and the only other hook I use for hair rig, and I'm not completely sold on these, is you probably recognise that packet. It's the QM1, and which is a circle hook, but again it's PTFE coated, and you know, what I've found with these is I used to use them quite a lot a long time ago, and sometimes you'd have it when the tip would go flying round and there'd be nothing there. You have to use a short air with these hooks so that the bait reasonably tight to the hook on the hair, otherwise you do have that. But it just seems to be more of a problem with the smaller sizes you get that, as well as if sometimes you don't hook the fish properly. So the general consensus with QM1s seems to be you need to use them in a big size, so the 10 or 12. You know, other than that, I think they're pretty much a waste of time. So I tend to use these maybe very occasionally when the fish are big, with baits such as washters, you know, 7mm, just balance with something like that. And yeah, when the fish are big and they'll tolerate a big hook. So this is a really nice hook. It's the MXC1, and you use this for F1s or, you know, sort of skimmers, bream, and, you know, smaller carp up to 3 or 4 pounds or so. You know, reasonably wide gate, not mega wide gate, but, you know, wide enough for pellets and corn as well as maggots. So it's quite a versatile hook, I'd say. And I use, as I say, I use this especially for F1 fishing now. I think that size we're looking at now, 18, is about the about the perfect one. Summertime, you can maybe use a 16 with if you've got a few maggots on the hook, maybe, or worm. But this time of year, once we're getting towards October now through to next March, April, that 18 is absolutely mega. What I'd say about F1s as well is I tend not to go below an 18 if I'm honest. Maybe if you're fishing for F1s on a very pressurised venue, pressurised by matches I'm talking about, like Partridge Lakes or Tunnelbone Farm, maybe you could use a 20 in the winter. But to be honest, I just like to use an 18 with, single or double maggot, formula expander, and that just works for me. So in the last few years or so, I've really got into my silverfish fishing in winter on commercial fisheries. Just thinking it's a great way of fishing, and it's especially when it's cold, it just beats sitting there for a few pulls on the tip from maybe just a couple of fish over 5 or 6 hours. It beats that hands down. But what I always struggled with was the right hook. I wanted to use PTFE hooks because that's what I've just converted completely to, but I couldn't find one that was sort of the right, gauge or shape, and I ended up using the F1 pellet, which, was just the only hook I could really find that remotely resembled what I wanted. But to be honest, with the pellet, it's a little bit of a too rounded a gauge, I think, for maggots, for silvers, and the shank isn't very long either. And then along came our range, and along came this, the MXC 5. Now, if you look at the shape of that under the size there, you can see why that's perfect for silverfish. It's got quite a narrower gape, and I always think you match the kind of gape to the bait you're using. So for maggots, you want a smaller gape, and for pellets, you want a much wider one. But yeah, as I say, these are PTFE again. They're a light gauge. So, perfect really for roach and skimmers in winter. And again, those are the two main sizes. Again, because fishing, these fish aren't really caught that much throughout the summer. They tend to just go and ignored really. So you can use an 18. When winter comes and you fish for these fish, there's, some fisheries start silverfish matches, then you can use, an 18 a lot of the time, and you can get away with that, as I say, a lot of the time. Only when the fish become, really pressurised, which you sometimes see on some of these smaller. I've seen it, I know, when I fish the Oaks at Sesse a bit. They got hammered the last few winters or so. There's been quite a lot of matches on. There's been sometimes 2 matches on in the same weekend on the lakes. So the fish have had quite a lot of pressure, and you started missing bites on an 18. So that was the time to switch down to a 20. And you got, you started hooking more fish because they were starting to get a bit finicky. Again, you can use these for maggot fishing for F1s. They're not the right shape for pellet, as I've just mentioned, but for fishing maggots for F1s, maybe in the cold, then this is a good choice as well in the 18. When you're talking sort of lighter elastics, you're 6 to 8, 8 to 10 slicks, so it's nicely balanced. And also, don't be afraid to step up to the 16 as well. Especially if silverfish sport's good, or if F1 fishing's good and you're fishing double maggot. When we're talking sort of early season, March, April time, maybe sort of October time, November time, when the temperatures are sort of still good. Then you can get away with it. If you can get away with a 16, do so, because you'll lose less fish. And perhaps if you're fishing off the bottom for silverfish, bigger hook like a 16 for fish like Ide is going to hook you more bites than an 18 if they'll tolerate it. So it's all about working out if the fish will tolerate a bigger hook. So always be thinking, can I change this? Can I change that? What will happen if I go up a hook size? Will my catch rate go up? That's all part and parcel of being a decent match angler. Is never settling for a catch rate. Never settling for I'm getting a roach every 5 minutes. can I get one every 4 minutes, you know? So always be thinking ahead, always be thinking, what if I do this? Always have that plan C in your head. And you know, yeah, just think about your hook sizes. Try these PTFE hooks if you've not already. You know, I'm not trying to sell you them. I'm not trying to say this is the best thing selected. But, you know, just give them a go, these PTFE hooks, and see how your catch rate compares to your old hooks. Because I know I can say hand on heart they've improved my catch rate. Definitely I lose less fish. So much sharper. They don't rust as easy either in your hook boxes. So, yeah, don't just give them a go on one rig for an hour or so, you know. Put all your hooks over to them for a few matches or sessions. See how they do. Let me know in the comments how you get on. So, you know, happy fishing. Give these hooks a try. And thank you for watching again. I'll see you on the next one, folks. See ya.